us, we are going to talk about some of the impact measures, some of the promising practices that are presented in the report, and then also sort of infrastructure requirements. So if you're interested in implementing a similar approach and practice at your agency or institution, we'll talk about what that takes. And then at the end, hopefully there's time for Q&A and discussion and feedback. So who we are, I know that Robbie and Tasia will share more about themselves, but Robbie Lang is the CSF Director of College Services. Natasha Rodriguez-Ott is the Research Education Analyst at RTI. And then I am the VP of Program Strategy for CSF. So in my role, I support the team that provides training, technical assistance, program design, and improvement for our programs at CSF. So just a little bit of background in terms of who's been involved in this. We're so grateful to our partners who have been part of this project. If you don't know, College Success Foundation was founded in 2000. We provide supports middle school through college completion for both students and practitioners, all aimed at improving college enrollment, persistence, and completion, especially for low-income students and students of color. We launched this new college services coaching model in 2019. And because of some of the success that we had and some of the proof points that we were able to share, we were able to grow from 5 to 25 college services staff. This last year was our first year of expansion. So we're really excited about the opportunity to serve more students, especially using this model. A critical partner in this effort, especially regarding the study, is ECMC Foundation. They're a nationally focused foundation who shares our mission to increase higher education and career opportunities for underserved populations. And they've just been such a phenomenal partner to us, and they funded this 3-year project for us and are doing a lot of work to help us sort of share the results of the report. Fostering Success is an organization that provides training to all of our coaches. So all coaches are required to go through training on this particular model and approach. And that was sort of the focus of this particular study. So we will be sharing more about what are the strategies, approaches, and services that we provide and what are students saying about them. And then finally, Research Triangle Institute. This is where Natasha works, and she's going to share a little bit more about them in just a moment. So just to give some context for Fostering Success and our approach. So we provide support services to students during the summer and as they transition into college and then through college completion. We serve close to 4,000 or maybe closer to 3,500 students every year in this model and approach. And when like I said, we changed to this model in 2019. And when we did that, we were looking for a model that was student-centered and really let students sort of drive the interactions between them and our coaches. So we identified Fostering Success 7 Life Domains coaching model. It was developed based on research that was done by Casey Family Programs regarding what do foster youth need to complete college. And when we saw the model, it really resonated with us, and we felt this has application for youth beyond foster youth. And we felt like it was a great fit, again, because it's student-centered. When we started this, we did have a model where we were providing supports to college students and kind of using milestones, working with students through a set of activities. And students shared with us that they really wanted individualized support. So for some students, that approach was really great. And for other students, they said, oh, some of those things were helpful and some of them weren't. And so we realized we don't want to require students to receive supports that are not relevant for them. So we really wanted to be able to customize approaches, which this model allows us to do. The other thing we love about just a coaching approach in general is it is about facilitating the development of trusting relationships between coaches and students. And Robbie will share more about this, but that is really what helps students sort of open up about what challenges they're facing and ensures that they get support or resources to help them through those challenges. We know that we're in a time where needs are increasingly complex. And so it is really important to just allow students to, again, share what challenges are they facing, big or small, and what can we do to support them. And then the other piece that we really like about this model is it is about relationship building, but it's also about skill building. So you'll hear more about how this model promotes self-efficacy and independence for our students and helps them build skills that not only help them get through current challenges, but can help them have agency longer term so they can be successful. So that's just some background on who's been involved in this study, the students, the model. And I will now turn it over to Dr. Natasha Rodriguez for the next section.
Great, thanks, Danette. So I'm going to share more about our approach to the evaluation and how we worked with CSF College Services to understand the impacts of this program. I'm going to start just sharing a little bit about who we are and how we came to our approach. So I work with RTI International, and we are an independent nonprofit research institute. So we work with federal and state agencies, as well as community-based organizations and education institutions to understand what's working, how things can be improved with different programs, and really as a thought partner to identify what practices we can bring up and bring forward to support content offered across a lot of different areas. So my focus is in education, workforce development, doing a lot of work with justice involved youth as well. And with this particular project, we lifted up our the approach of taking a collaborative and evidence-informed practices. So we work closely, myself and my co-PI, Nithya Ventikaswaran, to work with CSF to understand what their needs were and take a student-centered approach with this evaluation. So we tried to understand the needs and the program itself before diving into approach. So we worked together on the planning, the collecting of the data, interpretation, bringing students and coaches along every step of the way, and then understanding what else we wanted to learn in a partnership throughout this process. So our main questions for the evaluation started with understanding what the students' experiences were with CSF College Services and how those experiences might have differed across students who are coming from different backgrounds or attending different types of colleges, and understanding what different coach interactions looked like too, since this was an emerging program at the time. We, through the evaluation, also assessed how coaching was impacting students' career and college success. And with this, we tried to start with the student lens of how they felt like coaches were impacting them. And you'll hear some of the findings that came out of our data collection with the students. And we tried to understand how the impact of coaching varied across students who identify with different groups and demographics, and also interacted with coaches at various levels. Some have more or less interaction with their coaches. And we through this whole process, we're also in contact with the coaches to understand what strategies they were using and try to connect those with some of the impacts. And that's what Robbie will share more after I share some of the findings. So the data sources we used for this study started with the students. So collecting online survey data from this coaching participants, as well as those who were involved in CSF and not involved in coaching. We also interviewed students and coaches throughout the evaluation. We additionally pulled from administrative records. So these were records that coaches took on the notes from their sessions and how often they were interacting with students and what that looks like, the content, as well as the application form. So information that students provided when they began participation. Additionally, we, to understand academic outcomes in particular for these students, we pulled from the National Student Clearinghouse records. We had 3 years of data that showed us whether students were enrolled in each quarter, academic quarter, during that time. And with this data, we were able to look at academic outcomes for students who were active with coaches as well as inactive, and do some comparisons to determine the impact. So we started off with trying to understand who are the students who are participating in CSF College Services. And so here I have a screenshot of what, or snapshot of what students look like in one particular year, but this was representative of several years of our evaluation. So there were around 700 students who were targeted for CSF coaching, so students who were early in their college career and involved through various methods through scholarships or the Achievers Program. Most of the students were attending four-year colleges, and the majority were enrolled full-time when they started college. So that, but we did also learn that students changed their enrollment intensity over time. A lot of the students who are involved in CSF and specifically in coaching identify with racial or ethnic backgrounds that have been historically marginalized. So we saw, for example, close to a third of the students are Latinx, about 21% are self-identified as Asian, and 21% as Black or African American. And over half of students identify as the first in their family to attend college and also to be experiencing low income at the time. So these are students who may have had lower resources or lower connections to college as they're entering the college atmosphere. So with our research, we identified 4 areas of impact that the coaches in this program were having on the students. So the first, in the area that CSF most directly seeks to impact, is that supporting academic outcomes. But there were also other areas that the students talked about that indirectly the coaches were supporting them in, or directly as well, that then helped them with their academic outcomes. So these areas are contributing to their support systems and their networks while they're enrolled. It's helping to expand their skill sets, their knowledge and access to resources, and also building their self-efficacy or confidence. So we'll go through some of the evidence in each of these areas. But before we get to that, I want to share about how all of these are kind of intertwined, because these impacts are not isolated. And so when the students were helping us to interpret how this is all interconnected, they spoke about how the coaches helped them from the start with understanding how to navigate institutional supports and knowing what else was out there. And then the coaches would help them to grow skills, which helped them to feel more confident, feel more connected. And all of these were kind of intertwined and contributed to their ability to pursue higher education. So these impacts that students described, there wasn't one that was more important or less important. They felt like all of these contributed to their college journey and success overall. Okay, so first I'm going to share about the academic impacts, and most of this pulls from National Student Clearinghouse data. And I'm going to share some of the overall impacts. We did do some comparisons of CSF coach students and not coach students, but I'm going to focus here on the overall trends that we're seeing in the data. So the first indicator we looked at was the persistence of students from year 1 to year 2 in college. So of those students who enrolled in college in the program in 1 year, what percentage returned the next year, the next fall? Among students who initially enrolled in 4-year colleges, 87% of the CSF coaching participants re-enrolled, compared to 84% of the national average. And when thinking about these numbers, I think it's important to go back to the context and understanding who the students are who are participating, and understanding that oftentimes we see lower persistence rates for students who are from who represents marginalized racial communities or coming from low income or first-gen college backgrounds. So the fact that we're seeing slightly higher persistence rates here, I think is significant in understanding the academic impact. And we see a similar trend for students enrolling in 2-year colleges here too, where 65% of the coaching participants return for a second year, compared to 62% of what we saw nationally in that same year. The second area we looked at with academic outcomes was the stopout rate during the first 2 years of college. So this is what percentage of students stopped out for 4 months or more, which would equate to about a semester or a little over a quarter of enrollment. And what we found was that about 14% of CSF coaching participants stopped out during their first 2 years of college, compared to 44% nationally. So I'll also note here, this data focuses on students who enrolled in 2019. So this is straddling the pandemic and in time when many students were stopping out and thinking about their next steps. So I think it's really positive to see a lower stop out rate among the participants. And I also have another metric here that 39% of CSF students before coaching was offered. So in earlier years were stopping out. So we did see that there was a shift with CSF students who began to participate in coaching, where they were stopping out less often. So we, through the surveys and interviews with the students, we wanted to ask them about what did they feel like the coach's role was in their term-to-term persistence. We're seeing some data through that supports that there's an impact here, but we wanted to hear from them about what was the meaning of that role and the context around their how the coaches were helping them with their persistence. So we heard that about 85% of students felt that the coaches really did impact their ability to persist, their ability to go term to term. And the size of that role varied across students. Some felt like it was more instrumental. Like they talked about how if the coaches had not worked with them to find financial aid or help them with their study skills, things like that, they wouldn't have been able to persist. Others, it was a smaller role with helping with resources that they needed to go and take additional steps to remain enrolled. We have a quote here from one student about how the coach helps them to put things in perspective of why they wanted to do it, helping them with their motivation and understanding that there were systems of support out there that they hadn't been pulling on yet. So next, I'm going to share about some of the non-academic impacts that we heard from the students that contributed to their college journey. So in addition to asking students about the role coaches played in their persistence, we also asked about how they impacted their college journey overall. So beyond academics, how the coaches were supporting them. And 92% shared that the coach played some role in helping them succeed, be it a small role, large, or an instrumental role to their success in college. We also heard that this role varied for students who participated in more coaching versus less coaching. So students who had more meetings with coaches were a higher percentage reported that the coach was instrumental to their success or had a larger role in their success. So this suggests that having more coaching sessions, even just having 1 or 2 more coaching sessions was impactful for them in supporting their college journey. And so then we were through this, we decided to dig more into what is it about each coaching session and those individual times where they're with coaches that really helps them to feel like it's contributing to their college journey. So the first area we heard about is it contributed to their support system. So the students shared that about 91% of them reported having someone on campus they could go to for support. For some of these students, it was their CSF coach, like that main person that they go to. Some of the quotes on the left side here share where they felt like the CSF coach was the person they were most comfortable with, the person they could talk to. We especially heard this for the students who were the first in their family to attend college. They felt like they weren't sure who to go to and they could trust their CSF coach to answer questions and really depend on them. For other students, the coach wasn't necessarily their first person, but they did feel like they could go to their coach for different types of support than other people on campus. So a number of students mentioned how the coach is not affiliated with their university, and that made them want to go talk to the coach more because they didn't feel like they'd be biased toward making them want to do certain decisions or try certain things on campus, and really were invested in them as a person. So students also shared that the coaches helped them with expanding their skills, resources, and knowledge. So 96% of students reported growth in their knowledge, skills, and awareness in a variety of content areas that mirrored those the fostering success framework that Danette shared earlier. And the students really appreciated that they could go to their coaches for different types of knowledge. We also heard from students that they felt their coach taught them how to find their own support or resources. So it wasn't just giving them information, but giving them skills to go and find more information in the future. So, and as one of the students shares here, they felt that the students didn't just give them the resources or the answer, but they showed them how to find it and gave them skills to succeed now and later. The last area I'm going to highlight where we heard an impact was on building self-efficacy. So building their confidence in themselves and their ability to act and to pursue higher education, and confidence in themselves overall. So 72% of students agreed that their coach partnered with them to set goals. They felt like the coaches really helped them to identify what they were interested in and how they felt about the goals, rather than giving them a goal and setting it for them. The 71% of students also agreed that the coach held them accountable for action. So they were able to see what those action steps were and work with their coaches to reach their goals over time. So, and I want to highlight here how self-efficacy was related to the number of meetings with coaches. So the students who met with their coaches more times were more likely to agree with statements about positive self-efficacy. So for example, here we see that a higher percentage of students reported they felt confident in their ability to succeed among those who had 3 or more meetings with their coach. So we see a relationship here between building self-efficacy and that continued relationship over time. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Robbie to talk about some of the practices that led to these impacts.
Thanks, Natasha. Hey, everybody. Robbie Lang here. I serve as Director of College Services at CSF. And like Natasha said, I'm going to close us out with some of the concrete, promising practices that emerged from the focus groups and surveys with students and staff around coaching and what works. These are in the report. You'll be provided a copy of the report as well. I encourage you to look through it. It's worth the read. So number one, promoting a warm handoff with students. And just to set some context for this slide, CSF provides pathway of support services to students, starting in middle school through college. And within that pathway, there are obvious key transition points, middle school to high school to college. And at least within CSF, the students' go-to point person changes at those transition points. So, in high school, students are working with their CSF high school advisor. And then in college, they change to a new person, their CSF college coach. So something that we know, the more that staff can facilitate a warm handoff with a student between their past and their future point person, this correlates to stronger student outcomes. So for example, high school advisors right now in the spring are working with college coaches, planning end of the year college services and enrollment events, college signing days, end of the year celebrations. These are great opportunities just for that high school advisor to help connect and introduce the student that they've been working with to their future college coach. A simple introduction like this is not super complicated. It makes a huge difference in terms of the level of engagement that the student will have with their future coach. And I mean, trust is at the center of this. We're all humans, we're social creatures, and it's just usually a lot easier to meet somebody new through an introduction of somebody that both parties already know and trust versus trying to start up from scratch. And without an introduction, it's just a lot harder to form new connections where we might be more careful and more cautious with people that we don't yet know. And I'll even add, it's even when there is this introduction from a mutually trusted party, it still takes time to build a trusting relationship between a coach and a student, but it's extremely helpful to not have to start from zero each time. Okay, so the next slide, using multiple channels to message students. So this might not always be possible, depending on the contact info that you have for young people that you serve, or the communication channels that you're allowed to use. But in our experience with CSF students in college, using multiple communication channels yields higher engagement rates and draws more students into coaching. Our college services team, for example, we use email, texting, phone calls, as well as physical mail for conducting student outreach. In terms of the actual coaching sessions that occur, those are both in person, on campus, as well as virtual, remote, just like this over Zoom, depending on the campus. So each communication channel, I would say, has its own strengths and limitations, but in combination with each other, that's the key. They bolster each other. If a student receives an email and a text message and a phone call from their coach, they're going to say, this person is persistent. They really want to talk with me. Now, of course, there's definitely a line between being overbearing and being intentional and persistent with communication. So coaches are careful about, strategically spacing out and timing messages to students, so they're not all getting sent on the exact same day. That would make somebody feel hounded and be counterproductive. But persistent, as well as persistent messaging and strategic timing, stacking of communications, this is necessary. One email or text here or there is really not going to be sufficient to engage very many students. Coaches might have to try 10 or more times, it's true, before a student engages back. And you never really know. You might kind of assume at a certain point, like, well, I'm going to keep trying, but this student I'm just not connecting with. And after enough tries, you sometimes get a message back from a student, hey, I'm so sorry I haven't responded. Things have been really busy. Can we set up a meeting? This is great. This is great news when a coach gets this response, and it's necessary. Just the volume of communication and using different formats really helps. I guess just to lastly on this is just a lot of coaching, college coaching, at least initially, is chasing students. You have to demonstrate your value quickly when you do connect with them. Students are busy and they're going to be thinking, what's in it for me? Why should I engage with this person? And I don't say that as a negative attribute. I think it's something super normal, and it's something that we all do to various degrees. So, in our communication with students, coaches aim to personalize messages as much as possible, make it relevant and valuable for the student. Next slide. Thanks, Danette. Okay, so promoting repeat engagements. As Natasha showed in the data, students with more coaching sessions, more coaching participation had stronger outcomes. And so the goal here with this is, when you're meeting with students, is to provide relevant information, resources at every meeting. But I do want to offer an important caveat here. We're not talking about giving unsolicited advice or information. And that can be really tempting as a coach or advisor, anybody who's working with young people in a formal helping role context, to give advice about what the student should be doing that will yield successful results, especially when it is sound and well-intentioned good advice. What could be wrong with that? Students, they need to know certain things to be successful in college, and by sharing that information with them, you're ensuring that they know what they need to know, right? But unsolicited advice, it usually falls flat, and it's usually ineffective for numerous reasons, numerous reasons. Perhaps the student isn't ready for it yet. They can hear it, but they aren't ready to act on it. So then it disappears, it evaporates over time, or it just doesn't resonate at all. Or they feel like the person giving them advice hasn't taken the time to get to know them or understand their goals and priorities. And if that foundation were set first, then the advice could be much more well-received and actionable. So our coaches will often start coaching sessions with something like, sitting down with the student, my hope and goal for our time together today, as always, is for it to be useful to you, and that you get something out of it. Is there a topic or a question at the top of your list that would be useful to you and for us to discuss together? Starting with something like that doesn't need to be word for word, but it frames the meeting from the beginning, so that the student's in the driver's seat and given the opportunity to set the agenda with the coach. And sharing that power is a really important tenet of coaching. You're providing relevant information to students consistently by doing that. So when students are consistently getting something out of their coaching sessions, they're more likely to come back. And as a result, the students and the coach, they get more time together, multiple meetings throughout the year, and that yields higher results, as we saw from the earlier data. So all of this, feeds in. Is provide relevant information. Yes, very important, but the way in which that occurs is super important as well. Next slide. You're going to look at these and say, these seem pretty obvious, I think, if you're to look through them. So they are fairly obvious in terms of working with and supporting young people. So ask questions and be a good listener, be relatable and empathize, interact without judgment and express care, follow up on students' concerns. These aren't listed here just as like obvious examples. They're listed because students named these things. These came up in focus groups and surveys with them about what they liked about coaching, what worked for them. Why did they return after their first time meeting with the coach? Why did they return? And these were the high-level themes that were coming up that students were sharing with us. So wanted to name them, and sometimes it's helpful. You know, we kind of know these things intuitively to a certain extent, but when it's also supported by formal research around this, that's helpful to lean on. And I'll also say that some of these they're easy in theory and then harder in practice, just kind of like we were talking about before, or I was talking about before. That going back to that impulse of like providing unsolicited advice or a word of caution to a student if we disagree with the choice that they're making that we think might be harmful. If we start with, you know, started out with those things first, then we're not really demonstrating active and engaged listening, it'll probably fall flat. But if we start with active and engaged listening, any advice that comes might be much more well received. So there's the famous Maya Angelou quote highlighted here: people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And when young people feel seen and heard, and they feel like they matter to someone else, they remember that feeling, it stays with them. And so using coaching principles and promising practices is a good way to show somebody that they matter. So lastly here, just kind of covering some of the, oh yeah, go ahead, Danette, to the infrastructure. Infrastructure to supporting coaching and setting for success. You can go to the next slide. So at least for college services and for our coaches, all of our coaches go through and complete the Fostering Success Coaching Institutes, both the level 1 and level 2 trainings. It's a combined 60 hours of training altogether. It's very hands-on and practice-based. And we also, in addition to these, we have a monthly coaching practice session and knowledge sharing together just as a coaching team. You know, I would highly recommend if you're exploring coaching, just to take a look at Fostering Success Coaching Institute. They're one of the few organizations out there that is accredited through the International Coaching Federation that is focused on supporting youth and underserved youth. They're fantastic. We're doing level 2 training with them right now, and they've been great. So data systems, we use Salesforce as our CRM, our student information system. So coaches have access to their roster of students there, and they can log all of their coaching sessions with students, as well as outreach gets logged. Enrollment changes, we can, if a student changes to another school, we can reassign them to another coach, and then there's a very smooth handoff there. So having a good data system and like Salesforce could be helpful for this. And lastly, campus partnerships. So wherever it's possible, setting up data sharing agreements and MOUs with campuses to allow two-way data sharing, you know, back and forth to help us better confirm and track student enrollment status, persistence, and completion. This is the bottom line. This is what we're really trying to do, is we want to support student success, persistence, and completion. So having these agreements and these systems in place better allows us to show our effectiveness and the effectiveness of the coaching strategy that's outlined in the report. So with that, I think we're gonna have some time just for questions, see what comes up, and we'll do our best to respond to them. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Danette, Ravi, and Natasha. Yeah, let's give it some time to see if folks have questions. And then in the meantime, I'll drop copies of the report in the chat, and then we'll also follow up with an email for copies of those as well. So I've shared a copy of the Promises Practice Report as well as our annual CSF Impact Report. And we would love feedback from folks about your experience with this webinar. So if you could please take a couple of minutes to provide input in our post-webinar survey, that'd be much appreciated. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat or Q&A. So with that, just wanted to give another thank you to Danette, Ravi, and Natasha for your time and the presentation. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Take care. We'll see you at the conference in May.
Thank you. Thanks, Donna. See you.